Okay, let's unpack this. Think about just, you know, moving through your day,
Hmm.
sending an email, talking to your boss. Maybe you're just picking a profile picture online.
Hmm.
Have you ever had that feeling, that sense you're not just being yourself, but you're like actively deciding which version of yourself to present?
Oh, absolutely. Like you're kind of performing.
Exactly, like you're on display somehow.
Yeah, it's a feeling I think most of us can relate to, isn't it? That sense that, who you are right now with these people feels, well, it feels different from who you might be somewhere else or with someone else.
Absolutely. And that feeling, that really common human experience, that's kind of our starting point for this deep dive.
Right.
We're going to explore social life, identity, how we present ourselves,
Yeah.
all through some really insightful sociological ideas we found in the source material you shared.
Yeah, we've been looking at excerpts that dig into some key perspectives.
Mhm.
Erving Goffman's dramaturgical perspective is a big one, definitely.
All right.
But we're also weaving in related ideas like symbolic interactionism and labeling theory.
And our goal here really is to quickly pull out the main ideas, the sort of potent nuggets from these sources.
Distill it down.
Yeah, exactly. We want to give you, the listener, a clear, maybe a shortcut view into these really powerful social dynamics, the things that are constantly shaping how we interact, how we see ourselves, how we see others.
And I think there's really no better place to kick things off than with Goffman. His core idea, the dramaturgical perspective,
Hmm.
it uses this metaphor that, well, once you hear it, you kind of start seeing it everywhere.
It's that idea, isn't it, that social life is basically like a theater performance.
Exactly.
We're all, in a way, actors,
Yep.
and the source material says we're constantly playing different roles depending on the context, the scene, as Goffman calls it, and who's watching, the audience.
It really highlights how much of our social behavior isn't just, spontaneous emotion bubbling up. It's often intentional. It's a presentation.
Yeah, a deliberate performance. And the source breaks this down really well, I thought. This central idea, this split between the front stage and the backstage.
Right. The front stage is, well, it's where the performance actually happens. It's where we act in ways that are expected, maybe more formal, designed to create a specific impression.
Okay.
And the source gives some great examples, like think of a waiter in a restaurant.
Okay, yeah.
On the dining floor, the front stage, they're putting on that cheerful, efficient persona for the customers, right? Even if they're totally stressed out underneath.
Or the job applicant example was good, too. Meticulously choosing the right clothes, rehearsing answers.
Exactly. Highlighting achievements, projecting competence, professionalism, that's all front stage.
And, social media comes to mind immediately. Those curated versions of our lives we put out there, often a very conscious front stage performance.
Oh, definitely. And politicians, they're absolute masters of the staged appearance, aren't they? Projecting power 1 minute, approachability the next. It's all performance.
So that's the front stage. What about the backstage?
Well, the backstage is the contrast. It's where the actor can step off stage, drop the character, relax,
Ah, okay.
behave in ways that just wouldn't fly on the front stage. So for that waiter, the backstage is maybe the kitchen or the break room,
Right.
where they can complain about a difficult customer or joke around with colleagues, just unwind in a way they'd never do in front of the diners.
Makes sense. And this constant effort involved, controlling how others see you, making sure the performance lands right.
Yeah.
The source calls that impression management.
Exactly. And it's not just words, it's everything. Your facial expressions, how you hold yourself, your tone of voice, the clothes you wear, even the setting you choose. It all sends cues.
Right, like that job applicant, again, the suit, the firm handshake, the confident tone, it's all part of managing the impression, projecting qualified candidate.
Totally. And it also involves knowing which role you're supposed to be playing and following the social script that goes with it.
Yeah, like you automatically shifts, don't you?
Yeah.
Being a student in a quiet lecture hall, you follow one script attentive, taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
But then, at a party with friends later, you're playing a totally different role, following a completely different script.
And sometimes, according to the source, this isn't just a solo act. It can be a team effort. It mentions teams and collusion.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
So like a group working together.
Yeah, exactly. To maintain a certain image or a shared understanding of the situation. The classic example is a family hosting guests, right?
Right.
They might all agree, maybe unspokenly, to put on a show of perfect harmony and happiness for the visitors, presenting this unified front.
Even if things are maybe a bit tense behind the scenes.
Precisely. They're colluding, working as a team to manage that collective impression.
Got it. And it's not just about people. The physical environment matters too. Props and setting,
Hugely important. They help define the roles and give legitimacy to the performance.
like a doctor's white coat.
Perfect example. The coat, the stethoscope. They aren't just practical items. They're props that signify doctor lending authority to that role.
Or think about a courtroom. The judge's bench, the witness stand, the formal layout.
Right. That setting reinforces the seriousness, the roles, the power dynamics inherent in that situation. A speaker's podium does something similar.
So you can really start to see this framework applying all over the place. Customer service, how we navigate online spaces, political campaigning.
It's everywhere once you start looking for it.
And maybe the most profound point from Goffman that the source highlights is what this all suggests about identity itself.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
It sort of implies that maybe we don't have this single, fixed, authentic, true self deep down.
Right, but rather we perform different selves depending on the situation, depending on who's watching.
So identity isn't this static thing we just have.
Exactly. Goffman frames it more as a dynamic process, an ongoing act, a performance that's constantly being shaped by the social context, by our audience, by social norms. It really shows how deeply those norms influence who we appear to be, moment by moment.
Okay, so Goffman gives us this really powerful theatrical lens. Life is performance, managing impressions, front stage, backstage. Got it. But what happens if we shift the focus a little? Maybe understanding social life isn't just about how we perform a role.
But more about how we actually build reality together through, like, shared understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads us towards another perspective mentioned in the sources, symbolic interactionism, associated with thinkers like George Herbert Mead, Herbert Bloomer.
Right. And the core idea here, as the source explains it, is that society isn't just a stage with actors. It's actively built, constructed through the shared meanings we create and interpret during our interactions.
Meanings attached to symbols, right? Like words, gestures, even objects.
Precisely. Those symbols don't have meaning on their own. We assign meaning to them collectively. And crucially, our sense of self, who we think we are, isn't just there from the start. It actually develops out of these interactions.
Okay, so how did that work?
Well, a key concept here, pulled from the source, is the looking glass self, an idea from Charles Cooley.
Looking glass self.
Okay. The idea is that our self-concept, how we see ourselves, is heavily shaped by how we imagine other people see us.
Ah, so we see ourselves reflected back.
Exactly, reflected in their reactions, their judgments, their perceived opinions of us. It's like looking in a social mirror.
So if Goffman is focused on how we manage the image we project outwards,
Right.
symbolic interactionism seems more interested in why we act the way we do, based on the shared meanings we're constantly negotiating and interpreting with others.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The self isn't just something you strategically manage for an audience. It's actively shaped by the interaction itself. Through that whole process of interpreting symbols, taking the role of the other, thinking about how they see us.
So the key mechanism is less about solo impression management and more about like collaborative meaning making.
Exactly, making sense of the world together. If Goffman's actor is deciding how to present the character, symbolic interactionism is about how the actor and the audience kind of co-create the play's meaning as they go along.
Okay, that makes sense. Performance versus shared meaning. And then the sources bring in a third perspective, labeling theory.
Right, associated with names like Howard Becker, Edwin Lemert, and this adds another layer entirely.
How so?
Well, labeling theory argues that some things, particularly deviance, but also aspects of our identity more broadly, aren't just about performance or even shared meaning. They can actually be constructed by the labels that society or powerful groups within society apply to us.
So like being called something.
Yeah. The source points out how getting labeled, say, as a troublemaker in school or gifted, or even something serious like criminal by the justice system can have a profound impact.
How you see yourself.
Definitely how you see yourself, but also how others treat you. And that can lead to a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where you start to live or down to the label.
And this is where ideas like stigma come in, right? Or master status.
Exactly. A master status is a label that becomes so dominant, so powerful, that it kind of overshadows all other aspects of your identity in the eyes of others. Think ex-con, or sometimes even disabled.
So contrasting this with Goffman, labeling theory seems to see the audience differently, not just passive viewers or even collaborators.
Right. More like active agents of social control. Institutions, schools, courts, the media, even just powerful social groups, they have the power to define people, to assign these labels.
And while Goffman's self seems quite flexible, adaptable, strategic,
Labeling theory suggests that self-identity can become much more rigid, more fixed, more limited by these powerful, sticky labels that get attached to you. It's less about your skillful impression management.
and more about how other people's definitions of you can stick, whether you like it or not.
Exactly. And it differs from symbolic interactionism too, right? SI is about that mutual creation of meaning.
Whereas labeling theory often focuses on meaning being imposed, especially when there are power differences involved.
Precisely. It really shines a light on what happens when someone else, often someone with more power, gets to write your role for you, gets to define who you are.
Okay, wow. So we've got these three really distinct, but also kind of related ways of looking at things.
Yeah. Goffman's dramaturgy. Social life as performance.
Symbolic interactionism,
Yeah.
life built on shared meanings and interaction.
And labeling theory. Identity constructed through social reactions and powerful labels.
And the source material did a nice job, I think, summarizing how they focus on different things. Dramaturgy is about roles, presentation, managing impressions.
Symbolic interactionism emphasizes symbols, the process of interaction, how the self emerges.
And labeling theory brings in labels, power dynamics, social control.
And they offer different pictures of the self, too. For Goffman, it's flexible, adaptable, managed.
For symbolic interactionism, it's socially emergent, built through interaction.
And for labeling theory, it can be socially imposed, maybe even constrained or fixed by those external labels.
So going back to that initial question, how much of what we show is the real you versus what's expected?
Well,
Goffman might say you're performing different real selves for different audiences.
symbolic interactionism might suggest the real you is partly constructed from how you interpret those shared meanings and the reflections you get back from others.
And labeling theory adds that maybe the real you is significantly shaped or even limited by the powerful labels society has already placed on you.
Exactly. So putting them all together, these perspectives, they don't just give you one answer. They give you this multifaceted toolkit.
Right.
Goffman helps you see how we present ourselves, the mechanics of the performance. Symbolic interactionism gets more at the why, the shared understandings, the self-formation process.
And labeling theory reveals the consequences, especially when power is involved, when others get to define who you are.
Yeah.
And that's really the value here, I think, for you, the listener. These aren't just abstract academic ideas. They give you some really incredible tools to analyze, to dissect, to understand your own social world better.
You start seeing things differently.
You really do. You can start recognizing the performances, the ones you do, the ones others are doing. You can see how shared meanings are constantly being, negotiated in everyday conversations. And you become more aware of the power of labels, how they shape identities all around you, maybe even your own.
It definitely shifts your perspective on pretty much every interaction you have.
It really does. So yeah, we've taken this deep dive into Goffman's theatrical world, the shared meanings explored by symbolic interactionism, and the sometimes stark reality of labels from labeling theory.
They each offer these powerful, quite distinct windows onto the really complex ways we navigate social life and construct who we understand ourselves to be.
And it leaves you with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? If, like these sources suggest, so much of our identity, our experience of being a self, is constructed through all these social processes, the roles we play, the performances we give for different audiences, the meanings we build together, and maybe even the inescapable labels others stick on us. What did that actually mean for that idea we often hold on to, The idea of having one single, fixed, unchanging, totally authentic, true self hidden somewhere deep inside.
Yeah. Is identity something we find buried treasure style, or is it something we're constantly doing, constantly creating and recreating on this complex social stage?
Something to maybe ponder as you step back out onto your own front stage today, negotiate those meanings, and navigate whatever labels the world might send your way.